Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to Untangled. Today we have Lauren Vasconcelos, a senior user experience designer with a rich multidisciplinary background spanning UX, product design, research, and interior design. Lauren, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. All right, ma'am. So I love what you said. I asked Lauren if she was nervous, and she's like, "No, I feel like we're just gonna hang out and talk." That's
Lovely.
exactly what we're gonna do. So I appreciate your time today. We'll start with, let me say it like this. So, Lauren, my audience is a mix of people who kind of span all of the UX spectrum. Okay. So,
Mhm.
people who are thinking about UX design, content research, all of the things, as well as, old heads like me who are like, what's next? Okay. So, we'll do some level setting for the audience. So, let's start with tell me who you are and what you do.
Sure. So my name is Lauren. Right now, I'm primarily working at a consulting firm that designs and builds trading platforms for financial institutions. So I've been there for about a year now. Prior to that, I have done a little bit of freelance work, worked for some startups on the side, and spanned different industries. I've done healthcare, I've done finance, I've done vet tech, a little bit of everything. So right now, I have worked with the same client at Adaptive, which is the financial consulting firm, for about a year now, and we just wrapped up that project, and so I'm ready for whatever is coming next.
Sounds good. Let's talk about how did you get into UX design?
Yeah, so I don't really remember the initial moment that I found out what UX design was. I think it just kind of organically presented itself because even when I was an interior designer, I spent 8 years at WeWork and we started developing an app for the members to use. And so I think that was probably the first time that I was exposed to product design and what they do and how that can overlap and interface with what we were doing in the physical spaces. And I loved interior design. I did it for 10 years, but I did so much traveling and worked long hours. And I think after about 10 years, I was just ready to shift my focus and have a little bit more time for me, just feeling a little bit burnt out. And so during the pandemic, I was laid off from my job, and I worked at a residential firm and another startup for interior design after that, but nothing really resonated or felt like as much of a fit as WeWork did. So, like we all were during the pandemic, I was kind of thinking, like, is this really what I want to continue doing? Because I had a job offer on the table for another interior design firm, and at that point, I had started researching programs for UX design. So I was looking mostly at General Assembly, and they had a cohort that started in a couple of weeks. And so I had this interior design offer on the table, and I had this UX offer on the table, and I had to decide, if I was ready to take the leap. And I had been considering it for, I would say, probably like 4 to 5 months, just really thinking about it, whether or not this is a risk that I could literally afford to take. It's a 3 month full time program. And it's scary, but I think the way that I just thought about it is, you know what, if I decide this is not for me, or if it doesn't work out, interior design is not going anywhere. I can always go back to it. I won't regret it, but I think I will regret not giving this a chance. So that's kind of how I ended up there.
So one of the many reasons that I wanted to talk to you or be able to interview you was specifically around that piece because designers are always reaching out like, should I do a certification? Should I do a general assembly? Like, what are your thoughts on that particular program? And then the idea, and then I'm also interested in kind of how did it work? So you said it was a full-time program. So does that mean like every day, 8 hours a day, you were doing this? So if you could add a little bit more color there, that would help.
Yeah, sure. So I was looking at other programs, but I started to go on LinkedIn and I looked up designers who did boot camps that worked at companies that I was interested in working in. And I started to see what they did to make their transition. I also had a couple of friends who did the same, and almost everyone said General Assembly. And so it seems like that is the program that a lot of companies were hiring from. Like, that's not to say any of the other ones like aren't as good, and I don't know because I didn't go through them, but it seems to be very well regarded, I would say, in the industry. So that's ultimately what I decided to go with. I did do full time. It is 8 hours a day, and I think it was 8 hours. It might have been like six. I don't know, but it's full time a day in class, and then you do have homework that you're working on in the evening after that for 3 months. They do also offer a part time where you do class in the evenings, but it was going to be so much work, and I just personally didn't feel like I would be able to split my time that way, that it would just be too much, and it also is longer if you do it part-time. So to me, I was like, I just want to do this as quickly as possible and then hopefully get hired somewhere and start working.
So if you remember, as you were going through your program or getting introduced to UX, were there any kind of like aha moments or shocking things that you learned about this profession as you were getting started?
I wouldn't say anything shocking. I think anyone who has a design background, when you are potentially going through a program, a lot of it is going to just feel like very, I guess, elementary to you because it's design principles. It's things that you probably have learned either in design school or like through your job if you're a graphic designer, architect designer, whatever it is your background is. Um, I think really what differentiates is just understanding some of the user experience principles, which are a little bit different, of course, because you're working with digital platforms instead of physical spaces in my case. The software is actually, the interfaces are probably very similar to design softwares that you've used in the past. So, of course, there's a learning curve, but it's not starting from zero, I would say. So I think to me, I was nervous about making the switch, of course, but maybe the surprise to me was how much more I knew and how much more prepared I was than I thought that I was going to be. Um, I know that you and I talked about this before, but I also realized that in interior design, I was already doing a lot of user research because we would go to the pantries in the morning and sit and just observe people as they come in and what's their morning routine. They go get coffee, then they put their food in the refrigerator, then they go get the creamer. And we were collecting feedback from them and from building staff. And so that is exactly what user research is. We're getting feedback in order to inform the design decisions that we were making. So there's probably a lot more overlap in what people have been doing in the past than they think, if you really think about it.
So you come out of your program and you start working in UX. Was there a moment at any point when you were like, oh, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to be doing?
I think I definitely felt that even when I was just in the program. It felt like it came so easily. It all made sense to me. I was really excited about the work I was doing. I was having fun learning. So I actually felt that way even as I was going through the program, which was it was very affirming to me because again, like I was so nervous. It felt, I mean, it is a big life shift. You're risking a lot and putting a lot of time and money and resources into it. So I think I felt that even before I finished.
So for designers, and I say specifically designers because that's your background. So for anyone listening, I'm not saying anyone else shouldn't do it, but we're talking specifically to Lauren. What, if any, advice would you have for someone who's trying to make that decision, whether or not they should go to a certification program or do something different?
Yeah, I think one thing that I think people need to understand and know, and I think there were some people going through the program that didn't quite get this, is that just going through the boot camp and completing the assignments isn't just going to get you a job. You really do have to work at it. It's not just a free pass. And even for me, I graduated probably what in like 2022. I feel like that time was when the design product design market started to get really saturated. And even as I was graduating, it was really difficult to find entry level roles. And it's, I think, even harder now just because of the way that the job market is. So I didn't get a job right away. I had to be extremely persistent. I had to work all of my connections, and ultimately, that is how I got my first job was through a connection. So I know they really do hammer this home in the program, but networking and connections is so important. I think, especially with this job market. So I think it's important to know that just because you complete the program doesn't guarantee you a job. You may not find a job right away. You're going to have to be really persistent, sometimes even get creative with how you reach out to people and how you find these positions. But that's not to say if you're passionate about it and you're good at it that you shouldn't do it, because if that's how you feel, then I think you should.
So talk a little bit more about networking. So what does networking look like to you? Were there some things that you thought were effective, things that were not as effective?
Yeah, I think that's it's hard for me. One, because networking I think feels very vulnerable, which is hard because you're openly saying like I need help, I need something. And at least for me, it doesn't feel comfortable to ask for things that I need or to say that I need help. So for me, I had to be very vulnerable, and even with my friends who maybe weren't necessarily in product design or designers, just being comfortable enough to say like, hey, do you know anyone, is your company hiring, and just anyone really, just kind of letting them know, putting the feelers out, and asking for the help and asking for them to keep you in mind. The first position I got was through a acquaintance's networking group that he was in, and I had told him that I was looking for a job, and he saw that someone posted in this networking group. So it was actually like a second or third degree connection. But if I hadn't have been willing to let people know that I was looking, then I would have never found this opportunity.
I think that's very powerful because I don't know that I've given it that word. It is very vulnerable to say, "Hey, I'm looking for something. I need a job," right? And there's a lot of people who are like that right now. So I think that's good. That's good. I'm glad you shared that. Okay. Is there anything that you've done or tried from a networking perspective that was like, "I'll never do that again"? Like this was a horrible idea.
I mean, for me personally, I've gone to events and mixers, and they're fine. But I find that just being in a room with that many people is very overwhelming for me. So I don't feel like I'm able to be my authentic self and speak the way that I would normally. And so while that works for a lot of people, I don't think for me that's the best way.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So now you've been in the space a while. Another thing
Mhm.
that I noticed is you are not scared to pivot and change lanes and try different things. So let's talk about that. So you've gone from full-time positions, contract positions. Let's kind of talk through that.
Yeah, well, that wasn't really by choice, if I'm being completely honest. I had to pivot. I was working for startups, especially when I first started, and just the volatile nature of working at a startup is that they may run out of money. They may not have room for you anymore. They may decide to, in one of my cases, they decided to completely scrap the app that I was hired to build and move in a different direction. So that was hard because in some of the cases I didn't always have warning that that was coming. And then I had to be ready with my resume and portfolio to just again start the networking, letting people know that I am looking. And um, luckily, in between, through friends and connections, I was able to find little gigs here and there to kind of close the gap between the full time positions. But again, I think that goes back to when you asked me about what I would tell people if they want to make the switch. Like, you have to be prepared for the fact that because you are new and you are learning and you are entry level, that it might be really unstable for a while, and you kind of have to be willing to do whatever it takes to get through those in between times because it's very unpredictable.
So there's that. Is there anything else that you learned from kind of being prepared or staying ready from those type of experiences?
I found that the less that I stressed about it and worried about it and was anxious about it, the more that it just happened naturally. Um, and I don't know, that's probably a coincidence, but I remember the first time that I was let go, it was about 6 months that I was without a job, and I did not enjoy the time at all. I was an anxious, nervous mess. And finally, I found something. And then the second time that I was laid off, it was during the summer, and I decided, this time I'm not going to get all worked up over it because I saw that it all worked out, and I loved that job, and I met really great people, people that I'm still working with now. And I saw that it all worked out, and I just needed to like trust myself a little bit more and trust that it was going to happen. And I think I was only between jobs for like 3 months, and a little bit of that was my choice as well because it was the summer and I wanted to take a little bit of time off. But yeah, I think that was a big lesson that I learned personally.
So, thinking about all the work that you've done, do you have a favorite project or a project that you were like super proud of that, when you have bad days brings you joy again?
Yeah, I mean, so the company that I was laid off from because they decided to no longer build a product or a digital product was a online dietitian company that helped connect people with registered dietitians that are covered by insurance. And also, when I was considering making the switch from design or interior design to UX design, part of the reason that empowered me to do that is because I was feeling like I wasn't really making a positive change in the world. Some people would, let's say, like, oh, but you're making really nice workspaces for people and you're making them happy. And I'm like, well, that just doesn't feel like quite enough for me. Like, I really want to do something that feels to me a little bit more impactful. And so when I was working on that project, even though it ended up not coming to fruition, that was really fulfilling to me because I got to speak to members and speak to the dietitians and just see firsthand what an impact that was the product was making in people's lives. And so for me, that's something that I'm really proud of, even though it never ended up being created.
That's the hard part. So,
Yeah.
like, I tell people, especially designers, when they're like new and trying to figure it out, I was like, one unfortunate truth is a lot of times the work that we do doesn't
Hmm.
actually like get published, right? So it
Totally.
just feels like that it stings a little bit, but
Yes.
okay. Thinking about you and kind of like where you're headed, what types of things do you do or have you done to kind of stay connected and to what's happening in design and things that are changing?
Yeah, so I've been doing some continuing education courses in Coursera, Udemy, they have great ones. Um, and also now it's a big buzzword for everyone, trying to figure out how UI is going to affect our work and the future of the profession as a whole. And so just taking some time to actually work with some of those platforms and experiment a little bit and just kind of see how they're working and where they're at, even though we might not really be using them right now. I feel like in the future, they're probably going to become a little bit more prevalent.
Have you seen any AI features that you're excited about?
I mean, Lovable and those vibe coding platforms are, I think, very exciting in my experience, and maybe I just haven't done enough with them yet. I think they are really good at getting you from 0 to 1, but I don't think personally they're anywhere near completely replacing a designer. And the reason being, because it would just get like so frustrated. You could type in a prompt and it would get you maybe 70, 80% of the way there, but then if you wanted to make any changes or modifications, it would maybe change something that was fine. And then you had to figure out how to prompt it to get that thing fixed again, but actually fix the thing that you wanted to fix to begin with. And it's not quite there yet, but I think it's exciting to see where it could go. And still, even when I think it's working well, I just don't think it's ever going to completely replace a designer. I think you need some type of human check there, especially when it comes to integrating like research and things like that. I think there's always going to need to be a designer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about vibe. I always hear about vibe coding from like a developer standpoint, but never so
Mhm.
much from a designer standpoint. So, what does vibe coding look like for a designer?
So basically, the way that it works is you would create your screens with the prompt, the way that you would give ChatGPT a prompt that I want to, I don't know, let's give an example. Design a trading platform that has X, Y, and Z functionality. Like, can you design this for me? And it will give you some screens, and you can make changes. You can prompt it to make any revisions or whatever. This is what gets very frustrating, in my opinion. And then essentially from that screen, you as a designer can take something that's visual and it will translate it into code that you can use automatically. So technically, you don't really need an engineer if everything is all set and looking the way that you want it. So it can, I mean, I don't think you probably need an engineer. I would want an engineer to still look over it and make sure that everything is going to function the way that it's intended. But essentially, it's intended to take a lot of the heavy engineering work out of the process and allow designers to work visually to create a website.
Oh, that's pretty dope. Okay. All right. So anything else, any other trends that you're keeping your eye on that you're kind of thinking through or interested in?
I mean, I would say that's the biggest one right now. I mean, when you go on LinkedIn, that's what everyone is essentially writing about, that and how awful the job market is. And I mean, maybe that's another trend because I think another thing that I'm seeing a lot is how difficult it is as a early designer to get experience in a role right now because companies are trying to do less with more. So that means hiring senior designers. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in a couple of years when some of these senior designers move on. And I think there's just going to be this big hole in the middle. So how are we going to fill that hole? Honestly, I don't know.
I'm in the same boat. I
Yeah.
feel like we're at the bad end of a pendulum swing,
Hmm.
and it's gonna come back, right? And to me, I feel like it's gonna feel a lot like going into 2020 when it was like we need everybody right now, right? Because they've gotten away from having designers, research, content strategists, and then realized this AI can't fill that gap. Not entirely. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So today, what excites you about UX design?
I think what excites me is just to see where we're going. I mean, we keep talking about it, but I think the AI component is really exciting and compelling. There's a lot of things that you do as a designer that are a little bit busy work. And if you take that out of the equation, you can spend a lot more time on research and testing, which I think is so important. And so for me, what's exciting is automating some of these day-to-day tasks that are kind of boring and actually being able to focus hopefully a little bit more on what is important and what's going to make a really good product. So I say like that's the biggest thing that I think is changing right now.
So, you made my researcher heart happy when you talk about all the good things about research. So, how did you? So, I know that you had the moment where you realized like you were already doing user research in kind of the physical space, but where did you kind of start doing like UX type research?
Yeah, so I remember they do talk about it a little bit in the General Assembly program. They don't really focus on it as much, but I remember there were some people that were really interested in doing that full time. And I remember thinking, I don't want to do that. That sounds boring. I just want to design. And so when I was in this period between jobs and I was taking on contract work, I had the opportunity with someone who had a mentorship or apprenticeship position just doing user research, but it was related to interior design. It was for a startup that was utilizing third spaces like restaurants, hotels during the day for coworkers, and so it was related to building out that platform. So it was like sounds interesting. I might as well take this time to learn what I can and however much I can. So I'll give it a try because it's just a contract role. And I did that and only focused on research, and I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought that I would. It's actually, I think, really interesting talking to people and actually getting their firsthand experience and feedback. And for me, even though I wasn't doing the design work, it was, I think, really fulfilling to be able to put that all in a report and make specific design recommendations for the designers, and then seeing how those changes affected how people use the app. So I think at that point I realized that it's how important it is, honestly. And when I've done it as a designer as well, it just makes me feel so much more confident in the decisions that I'm making because I don't know, as a designer, and I used to get this with interior design too, sometimes it's just daunting because you're starting a project and you realize there's like a million different solutions to this, and a lot of them could be right, and then you get a little bit paralyzed because you're like, I don't I don't know what to do. Like, where do I start? What do I do? And so I found that research gave me a really good framework and guidelines in order to make decisions and feel really confident about those decisions when people ask me why I was doing something. So yeah, that's how I kind of got started doing research.
Is there something, again, I'm sure everybody who is like in research is they're just clapping, standing ovation right now. But we run into designers all the time who are probably, I don't know if they were even as kind as you are when in the beginning when you just called it boring, right? Like there are some designers who are like, I don't need research, right? I
Yeah.
know the people that I'm designing for. So is there something that we as researchers could do to kind of help demonstrate the value of research to a designer or get them on board sooner? Like, is there something we could have said to you back then that would have helped you get it sooner?
I'm not sure. I honestly think it might have been a case that I needed to do it for the light bulb to really go off. But I mean, maybe if there is a way to translate to someone how the research will make their design process easier, faster, quicker decision making, things like that. Which I guess maybe I should have just known, but I guess I didn't really realize how strong of an impact it can really have. And it can be like fun and interesting. It doesn't have, I mean, a lot of times you are interviewing people and you're just taking notes, and it's more of a qualitative type of research. But there are platforms now. I use one called Maze, and you can do unmoderated testing. And honestly, those are kind of fun to set up, and there's a lot of really interesting features. Like, it will record the users are going through, and you can see on their face sometimes like the expressions when they get stuck, which sometimes if you're doing it in person, you're so busy writing notes or something that you might miss that. But I just think there's a lot of, and they have a lot of different ways that you can ask questions and rank things. And so I don't know, it was kind of fun setting that test up, to be honest. It's not just as boring as writing questions on a piece of paper and then writing the response. There's a lot more that you can do.
So changing gears just a bit, I know when you go into a new company, and you have to spend time getting to know your stakeholders and all the
Mhm.
different teams and whatnot. What advice would you have for someone who is starting out and how they manage and deal with all of those different relationships?
Yeah, now I like to, at the beginning of projects, get some time with everyone that I'm going to be working with, whether it's product owners, engineers, whoever, and just ask them how they like to work. Because one thing that I have found is every company and every person is different, not only just like on a personal level of how they prefer to work, if they are super chatty and want to be collaborative, or if they kind of prefer to keep to themselves, but because every company is so different. Also, people I think have preconceived notions of how you might work as a designer. They might have assumptions of what you are going to do or not do. And a lot of times, like, it's just miscommunications that happen if you don't have that conversation up front, because they might think you're going to do things a certain way and then you don't. And so I think the biggest thing I found is how different it is every single time. Some product owners do some things, some don't. Some engineers love to talk to you all the time, some don't. And so I think the most important thing is just taking some time to kind of set expectations at the beginning.
That is so true. Just having the conversation. So thinking about kind of what's next for you. What do you think? What are you hoping for? What are you trying to do? Any idea what you want your next role to be?
Well, it's already kind of, I guess, decided what my next project is going to be. I'm really happy where I'm at right now. My first project was my first trading platform that I've ever worked on, and so that's a pretty steep learning curve because I don't necessarily really have a finance background, even though I've worked with an investment bank doing research, or an app that's focused on payments. So that was a steep learning curve. I learned a lot, not only about like how the industry works, and there's so much vocabulary and buzzwords. And even though I have tried, I still don't understand everything. And it's just a different type of design because a lot of it is data visualization and grids. And it sounds boring, and it can be, but at the same time, it's also really hard to design that and to display things in a way that are easy to read for people, making sure that you're displaying the right things at the right times and fitting everything into a small space and thinking about all the different screen sizes that might have to fit in. And so now that I've done that once, I'm excited to, with the experience that I have, start a new project and really refine what I've done the first time.
So I feel like sometimes people get into new roles and they get frustrated because they think they should know everything day one. So
Mhm.
based on your experience, how long do you think it takes to like get the industry, get the space, kind of understand what's happening when you get into a new role?
Well, I was there for a year. I would say I think I felt really comfortable probably about the 6 month mark. But I think the thing to realize, and I've worked at a lot of startups, so I think I've come to this realization pretty quickly, is honestly, no one actually knows everything and no one really knows what they're doing. So if you think it's just you that is unsure, no one does. And all you can do is use your best judgment and give it your best effort and learn through trial and error. No one's going to be mad at you like you think they might be.
So did you have to like outside resources to kind of get up to speed, or did the company have things that would help you kind of better learn like this trading space?
Oh no, it was so hard because they had already been working on this, I think, for well over a year, maybe even longer, if I'm being honest, maybe multiple years. So I was brought in as support, and I, from day one, just had to like jump in and figure it out. It was really hard. There was really no formal onboarding. They didn't do any type of presentation or give me a packet of information about how their organization runs. Um, and a lot of times people were so busy that they didn't even really have time to explain it to you. So a lot of the onus was on me to try and learn as much as I could on my own. But no, just had to, again, through trial and error, use my best judgment and let people give me feedback.
Let's talk about, and I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, so
Okay.
whatever.
Yeah.
But let's talk about your portfolio.
Hmm.
What's in it? How did you structure it? What are things that you think are important that other people should keep in mind?
I'm actually in the middle of completely redoing it right now. I was on Squarespace and it was fine, but I just think that platform, it looks like it's on Squarespace because there is quite a bit of limitation if you're not going to custom code, and I don't know how to code. So I was doing some experimentation with Webflow, and I took a class on that, and it's interesting. It is very robust. There's a lot you can do with it. And while I was in the middle of that, I found out about Framer, and I was like, oh, this is basically just using Figma, but you can do so much more than you could on Squarespace, and you don't have all of the details that you have to pay attention to, like setting a class in Webflow and making sure that it's really set up in a certain way. So I've been doing that, and that's been fun, learning something new. And I feel like it's given me a lot more flexibility in doing something that from the start looks a little bit more creative and custom to me. And in terms of what I have on there, I think well, there will be 5 case studies. I'm finally at the point now where I have built my portfolio enough that I can take out the projects that I did when I was in General Assembly, because I had those in there. And it was great. It showed probably a lot more process even than my professional work does, because we just had so much more time and we could really get into it. But right now, I think I have 5, my 5 most recent projects. And I do try and go through every step of the process. I think, I don't know, I got mixed feedback. And if you have people review your portfolio, you're going to have one person that says they love this thing about it, and another person will tell you that they hate that exact same thing. So, like, take it with a grain of salt. If you're getting interviews and interest, you're obviously probably doing something right. So, I don't think it's worth obsessing over every single piece of feedback that you get. Because at the end of the day, it also has to be authentic to you, sound like your voice and like how your process and how you work. So I do try and show process all the way from beginning to end, but I think now that I have a little bit more experience, I'm not adding quite as much because I had so much text before. And so now I think in some cases there's still text, but I think it's a little bit more visual, a little bit shortened. And I know now that I can add a little bit more detail if I'm interviewing or if someone asked for a little bit extra information, if I needed to put something together for them, I could. But I think because I've done it over so many times, I'm like, I don't want these to be so long that, and that's the thing, they were so long that I think in my head it was a mental block to try
Mm.
and redo it because I was like, oh my gosh, it's so much, but it doesn't really need to be. I think that's kind of what I'm learning.
I feel like every time I talk to a designer, they're in the middle of changing it again.
Exactly. Like
I,
we're never gonna be happy with it, you know, that's the thing. And so now I've gotten to the point where I know there are certain things that need to be in there that people are looking for, but at the end of the day, also it's kind of unlikely that anyone is really going to read all the paragraphs of information that I had written it up because mine almost read more like a report, I would
okay.
say. Which, you know, some people good, some people say it's bad. So I don't know.
I love that advice. You're going to ask everybody, and they're going to have a different perspective.
Mhm.
So I'm just glad you said that. So for you, what are like key components that should be in every design portfolio?
So one thing that I saw someone do, and now I'm doing it because I think it's really smart. At the top, at the very top, they have the client, how long the project was, what the different elements were, whether it was like design, research, etc., and exactly what they did on the project. And then also next to that, they had anchor links for the different parts of the case study. And so sometimes if you're skimming, you don't have time again to read everything that someone has put in a case study. Maybe you're only looking for what type of research they did. And so they had all of the different links there, and you can go and you can just look and see the part that you want to see, and you're not kind of scrolling forever trying to find the exact thing that you're looking for. So that was one thing that I saw that I added and I have really liked.
Okay. All right. So I like to ask everybody because I say you have to be a whole person, right, to be a good
Mhm.
UXer. So outside of work, what are some things that you enjoy doing?
Um, I do like to try and stay active just because I find it also has a very strong effect on my stress and anxiety levels. And I need to get up. Sometimes it's so easy just to get sucked in and work for hours and hours and kind of deliberate over these small details and feel like you're not getting anywhere. And I find when I get up and go do something, I can come and sit back down, and it just sometimes immediately is obvious what the answer is, but it's just hard because you've just been staring at it too much. So I do like to try and like get out, go for a walk, go for a run, you know, yoga, whatever, go to the gym, just try and make time for those type of things because I think that's important.
Okay. Is there anything else you were hoping we would cover today?
I feel like not necessarily. I think that was a great spread of questions.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah.
So before we close out, is there any last advice you would want to give to a designer at any stage of their career before we drop off?
I think the biggest thing, I deliberated over this for months whether or not I was going to do it. And in the end, I wish I had just done it months before when I originally had thought. And I think if you are really feeling that strong pull, just trust yourself that you will do whatever it takes to make it happen, and just be, you know, ready for any difficulties that might come, but like you can do it. And so I think for me, I just wish I had started sooner. And it's like that with so many things in life. If you want to try something new or you're like afraid, and then you do it and you love it, and you're like, well, I could have started this a year ago, but I was too afraid. So I think that's my biggest takeaway.
I like to tell people if you're scared of it, it's probably exactly what you need to be doing, right?
Right.
Like that is it. Well, awesome, Lauren. You have been delightful. Thank you
Oh,
so
thank
much for
you. You
hanging out
too.
with us today. We really appreciate it. Do you have anything? I guess I'll drop the link. Well, you'll be tagged anyway, so they'll probably come to your
Mhm.
page. Is there anything else you want them to know about what you're doing, or anything you have coming up?
No, this was great. It was great
All right.
chatting with you.
You too, Lauren. Thank you so much.
Have a good weekend.
You too.